know about the extent of the fraud, if there's fraud or not. You don't know. You have no idea. You saw people who were dark-skinned, I guess you're saying being harassed, and you want to say something to make it look good for the people that support you, your base. That's an ineffective leader. If you've only been there a week, you have no idea what's going on. You just learned the job. Remember, this person wasn't even taking care of herself until she got this job. So she's only been a week where she's able to pay her own bills and not have her parents take care of her, even though she's a 40-year-old woman. You don't know what's going on yet. You have no idea the extent of if there's fraud or not. You already saw what's happening in Minnesota. You saw a few videos there that probably did not look good. We'll show one in a minute. That there's issues happening in this situation. So the idea that you want to protect the providers, well, we'll protect the taxpayers. But this is why I think Seattle is going to have a pretty terrible 4 years. This is the level of ineffective, emotional leadership that doesn't really help anything. It just makes things worse.
Yeah, I think the fear in the Somali community is real. The fear in immigrant communities are real, so we're taking that very seriously.
Wilson, who's been on the job for a week, says she's not convinced there was more to the story. Sontag said he's seen enough to believe an audit of state funding of daycare centers is necessary, given allegations in Minnesota, Ohio, and Washington.
Well, there are questions, and I'm not saying they aren't answerable, but you don't know until you get the answers.
Along those lines, have you asked anyone to follow up on the fraud claims, either to the Department of Immigrant and Refugee Affairs or SPD?
No.
So there's, as far as you're concerned right now, there's no reason to suggest there's any sort of fraud?
This whole issue is not really about fraud, right? It's about dividing and conquering. It's about making an immigrant community a target, right? There's no reason to assume based on the identity of a daycare operator that their small business is doing anything wrong.
You see that emotional reaction that she put there? She was upset. She was already upset. And that's usually what happens when you have someone who is emotional instead of logical explanations. So when a mayor says this isn't really about fraud, before any investigation, they're not being cautious. They're being dismissive. And that's what bothers me. And that's what bothers a lot of people. No one said the fraud definitely happened. No one said that every daycare did something wrong. All people are asking for is to look and audit, looking at the paperwork, looking at the receipts, looking at the numbers. That is not an accusation. That is just basic adult responsibility. And the wild part about all this is, if there's no fraud, an audit actually protects honest daycare workers. It clears their names. It shuts everyone up. But when leadership even refuses to check, now people will start asking worse questions. This is where optics takes over reality. Katie Wilson is framing this as some kind of moral issue instead of a management issue. And those are not the same thing. You can care about immigrant communities and still verify where taxpayer money goes. You can walk and chew gum at the same time. Those two things are not enemies. They're supposed to work together because we've seen this movie already. In Minnesota, leaders said the same things. Don't question anything. Be careful how this looks. Let's not jump to conclusions. And years later, millions blew up. So when you hear this isn't really about fraud, all I hear is, I don't want to open up this box. And when you don't open this box early, someone else opens it later, and it always gets uglier. Too much attention is in Minnesota, so I probably shouldn't open up a fraudulent operation there, but Washington looks pretty good because they're not checking. Let me go there. That becomes the next tourism for fraud. And of course it would be a tourism of fraud. She just said it. I'm not going to direct anyone to investigate this further. So this is inaction. This helps people. If you're currently doing fraud in Washington, you're good to go. You don't have to worry about it.
My decoy and I went to Aisha Home Child Care in Kent, Washington, and she got inside. A corresponding page for Aisha Home Child Care on the state expenditure website indicates that this place has raked in $753,053 since 2022. We matched the address on the business card given to us with records for an Aisha Home Child Care on the Department of Children, Youth, and Families website for Washington State. The DCYF indicates that this place only serves 2 children. Their licensed capacity is 12, and they have 10 available slots, reflecting that this place only babysits 2 kids. But they're raking in $753,000? Even if this was, let's assume for a second, a legitimate daycare business that's only serving 2 children, there is no world where the government should be giving almost $1 million or $750,000 in subsidies to this place. On the inside, my decoy did see children. If this could potentially be a legitimate them so much money, even if they were a legitimate daycare business. I mean, just look at the first figure. $268,460 since July of 2025. If we're being generous, for 2 kids, that's $22,371 per child. What daycare makes this kind of money per kid in 1 month?
And if you are a mayor of a major city, inaction is a decision. This isn't a random situation here. This is a state auditor reviewing a $770 million program that is public taxpayer money. It's federal money. It's everybody's money. This is where I don't believe that Katie Wilson is going to be a responsible leader, because it doesn't look like this. Responsible leadership looks like you don't panic, you don't accuse, but you verify. Instead, what we're seeing here is the fear of backlash, the fear of headlines, the fear of being called names. And again, we already saw how this ends. Tim Walz didn't aggressively act early either. Warnings sat on desks, whistleblowers were brushed off, people were told to stop asking questions. Then you see what's going on now with Congress hearings, national embarrassment. The man just lost his entire political career, and funding cuts that hurt the very people these leaders claim to protect. That is really sad irony. When you ignore possible fraud to protect the community's image, you actually put the community at more risk later. Because once the fraud becomes undeniable, Washington doesn't negotiate. They cut checks, they cut programs.
Sontag said these are investigations that can take months or years. Wilson again saying she has not directed anyone on this particular matter in her first week to investigate further.
Chris, did the mayor say anything about working with the federal government?
Yeah, especially today when there's so much discussion about ICE and what we've seen in Minnesota. I did ask her about that. I asked whether she has reached out to...
Okay, thank you, Chris.
That brings us to our KOMO Pulse poll. Scan the QR code on screen to participate. Tonight we're asking, should an independent auditor be appointed to investigate potential fraud in our daycare system? Here's a live look at the results. Right now, most people responding, 97% say yes, just 3% say no.
So you see right there, even the people who are watching this program and went on this website to do a poll understand that there should be some more investigation. So you can tell she's going to start to lose these people because she doesn't know what she's talking about. She said, oh, there's no reason to assume based on the identity of daycare operator that their small business is doing anything wrong. That is classic bait and switch. Nobody said that identity equals guilt. Literally no one. That's the trick here. They took a question about money and turned it into a question about morality. And once you do that, real oversight dies. Let me say this clearly. Audits do not assume guilt. Audits assume nothing. They exist because systems are failing. People cheat. Some people lie on paperwork. And incentives matter. That's why audits exist in every serious organization on earth. When a mayor frames scrutiny as an attack on identity, it shuts down discussions. It freezes action. And it sends a message, please don't ask questions. And that's what really hurts these communities. And that's why the AG had their strong words to say about, I guess, influencers or independent journalists, which is always a problem if you see a government trying to stop independent reporting.
Run by Somalis in Washington are being harassed. Brown says the daycares are being targeted by, quote, unsubstantiated claims of fraud. He says, quote, showing up on someone's porch, threatening or harassing them isn't an investigation. Neither is filming minors who may be in the home. This is unsafe and potentially dangerous behavior. This all stems from allegations of fraud at Somali-run daycares in Minnesota. The Trump administration froze all child care funds to the state in response.
Take a look at that. That's a problem because they're really attacking the messages instead of answering the claims. They're just saying, well, these are influencers, it's viral videos, it's just social media. The problem is the questions never came from YouTube or X. They came from auditors. They came from whistleblowers. They came from other states where fraud was proven in court. There's people in jail right now due to this situation. So pointing at influencers is always a distraction. They can talk about Nick Shirley, you can talk about other people. And also, you can criticize his style, you can criticize his methods, but videos didn't trigger Congress hearings. The evidence did. If leadership acted early, if the audits were apparent, if concerns were addressed head on, those videos wouldn't have gone nowhere. When you have this type of silence, it creates a vacuum, and the vacuum creates speculation, and then the speculation creates the outrage. So here we are right now. Transparency is not racism. Audits are not attacks, and asking questions is not hate. If everything is clean, an audit should prove it. If something isn't, ignoring it just makes it worse. This is not even ideology, it's just reality. And seeing how Katie Wilson is going to run things, it's just going to be more problems for the state of Seattle. So unfortunately, they voted for the problems. So it is what it is. But let me know what you guys think about this story in the comments below. Thank you for taking the time.
Play it.